Hey Islanders, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Islander Robotics, where we teach each other robotics through programming. And real quick, before we actually start talking about today's topic, I just want to say thank you to all my subscribers. You're all truly awesome, and this channel would not be where it is today without all of your support. To those Islanders that have not yet hit that subscription button, please do consider becoming part of the Islander community. Now getting on to today's topic, which is going to be Python dictionaries, which is honestly an awesome data structure to learn and implement in your everyday Python coding. But instead of me actually trying to verbally explain it, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to write up some code. Some of you may recognize this code because of last week's video, but we're going to be adding to that code and we're going to be implementing dictionaries. So you're going to be all going into a time lapse in a couple of seconds, but quick disclaimer, this is my own interpretation of how to actually implement this software. If you all have another idea of how to implement this software, please go ahead and leave it down in the comment section down below, where I'll be glad to discuss that that way of doing it with all of you. So sit back, relax with your favorite snack, and let's get started, shall we? Hey yo Islanders, so I'm back, and if you're finding value out of today's video, please do consider hitting that like button. It really does help support this channel a lot. And we're just going to get into the code, where what I decided to do actually was so last video I had class up here. Now, not class, I had keyword up on the outside of the class. That's all great and dandy, but there was some discussion in my last week's video that made me start to think that there is a more efficient way to actually have this class that would make this software a lot more robust. And reason being is because by having that keyword outside the class, each time there's an instance of this class, all the values inside of keyword are not going to change for each one of those instances. So to get around that is by just adding keyword to the class itself and calling it a public variable, like by saying self.keyword. And this essentially makes it so if there's three instances of this class, there's going to be three instances of keyword with all very different variables inside of that keyword. The other thing that I decided to do was I actually took that keyword, changed it from a list into a dictionary. And a list and a dictionary are pretty similar but very different at the same time. And the reason being is because they're both index value data structures, but the way that you access those indexes are very different. As well as the way that you actually create a dictionary or a list is also very obvious. Reason being is because a dictionary, you create it by using curly brackets, where a list, you're actually using just regular brackets. Now, a couple of seconds ago, I just mentioned that they're both data structures that allow you to access values by index, essentially. A list, you're able to access a index with number indexes, and as well as those indexes only have one value, where a dictionary, you can actually nest values inside of that index, as well as that index isn't a numbered index. That index is actually a string index, or what a lot of people call it is a key ordered pair with that index. So for the rest of today's video, whenever I say key order, I'm talking about the string index associated with the dictionary. For instance, the best way to really understand this is if you're going to notice on line 5, I'm saying self.keyword at index keyword equals an empty list. Now, that is how you essentially access the index of keyword within our dictionary. The interesting thing is, though, is a dictionary, you don't have to use the append method. What you actually do is you actually just create the index like we just did on line 5, and we set it equal to something. It just has to be equal to anything, and then you create that value. Now, when I was saying that list, you can't actually, there's only one value within that index. What I'm talking about is that dictionaries allow you to nest. So you can actually have a variable that's equal to something inside of that index of that dictionary, or you can have a list like we have on line 5 associated with that index, or you can have a dictionary within a dictionary. I don't really recommend using a dictionary using a dictionary inside of a dictionary, because the reason being is that whatever you're trying to solve, chances are you're overcomplicating it, and you really just have to think about how to simplify it. And that's really why I do not suggest using a dictionary within a dictionary. Now, because this is a key ordered pair or a key pair indexes, what you actually have to do is you actually have to keep track of those indexes, and not like how you keep track of an index for a list where you have a for loop that's numbers. Instead, there's actually several different ways, but the way that makes the most sense to me, as well as what I decided to implement, was actually just have a list that has all the values of the keywords, or the key ordered pair. So what I decided to do was create the list on line 6. Well, line 4 I created an empty list. Line 6 I appended keyword, the value keyword, which is the same thing as the key ordered index that we decided to use for the dictionary, to the end of key. Now, that's what I decided to do for this code. Again, you can do whatever you want for your code. Same thing on line 19. I used an input value saying what is the name of the databases that you'll be using, and I set that input value to the variable database. Then I take database and I say self.keyword of index database. So whatever that string value of database is, I want to set it equal to a empty list, which is what I'm doing on line 19. And then I'm taking that value of database and I'm putting it into the list of key. All right, those are the changes that I decided to make from last week's code to this week's code. Now, continuing on to the brand new stuff is the insert function of this code. All right, so this is the insert section of the code. Really, there's a lot of information going on in this code. If you have any questions, please leave it down in the comment section down below, and I'll be glad to answer. But what I really want to pull all of your attentions to is this dot upper right here on line 27. And in order to fully understand, you have to understand what's going on line 26, where we actually create the user decision variable. And we're going to set it equal to the input method of Python. For those of you that don't know what the input method is, it's the way that Python allows your software to get user data. And in our circumstance, we're going to be asking if the user wants to essentially implement a specific number of keywords, or if they would like to just keep on going on and on until they decide to quit out of this section of the code. Now, what's going on line 27 with that dot upper is that you can never guarantee what your user is going to actually implement. So the way to get around that is by formatting your code into a specific way by using the dot upper, the dot lower, or the dot title method. Really, you can use either one of those three. In my circumstance, I decided to use the dot upper, and like I said, it's really just because you can never guarantee your user will actually implement the specific format that your code understands. All right, and what I decided to do was have it so that it recognizes yes. So no matter how the user types in yes, it can be capital Y, lowercase e, lowercase s, or capital Y, capital E, and then lowercase s. It doesn't matter. The code's going to take that string and convert it into all capitals, and then it allows the software to be able to make the decision if the user wants to actually access a specific number of implement a specific number of keywords. Now, going on to line 28, where we actually we use the input method to get the number of keywords that they want to use. Now, if you remember, I just said that the input method, the input method, the only thing that it actually exports or gives this variable is going to be a string. That's not what we want. We want an integer. So therefore we're using the int method within Python, which takes a string and converts it into a integer. Alright, so that's what's going on this code. And then 29 and 30 I will get to in a sec, but it's not going to really make sense until I get to how to get out of this while loop. Alright, so we're going to continue on to this for loop. And really, if anyone else knows another way to actually access specific keys within a dictionary, go ahead and leave it down in the comment section down below so that others can get reference, and as well as so that all of us can start having a discussion about different versions of accessing keys within a dictionary. But what I decided to use inside of this code was actually a for loop of strings that had values of the strings inside of our list from line 6. And those strings, what we're going to do, and since we create this for loop of strings, it's going to allow us to do very specific things. Like for instance, on line 32, we're going to check if key equals keyword, because keyword, well, the index of keyword within our dictionary is the only index that's actually going to have just strings. So therefore, we actually want to just single that section of the code out, and this is the best way that I thought of. If you can think of another way to actually implement this, go ahead and leave it down in the comment section down below. And since I want to single that out, I'm going to use this. I'm going to say, if this happens, if this is true, then I want to say self.key of index key dot append. Remember, this is this index of the dictionary isn't a single piece of data. It's actually a nested list. So therefore, in order to access that list and add elements to that list, we actually have to use the dot append. And then the cool thing about the append method is you can actually use the input value within the append. All right, so you don't have to come up with some sort of variable up above and then set the append equal to that. You can just have it all within one line of code. All right, so continuing on to the else, and since keyword is the only index of our dictionary that has to have string values, the rest of the values that are going into our dictionary are always going to be integers. So what's going on line 35 is the same thing as going on line 33. However, we're inputting integers instead of strings. And that's why the same reason why I have this int right here is the same reason why I have this int right here. As well as we're also so that the user doesn't get confused on what's going on, or what database they're implementing. We're also using fstring to actually take this key. We're going to put it right here, and it's going to tell essentially this. At this point, we know that's the name of the database that we're specifically accessing. All right, and then continuing on, this is where we actually get out of the while loop. So remember how I said 29 and 30 don't really worry about until we get to a spot of the code where we're talking about how to get out of the while loop. Well, we're saying on line 36, if size equals 0, meaning if the user decided to not actually implement a specific number of values or a number of keywords, that's when the code knows, hey, they're going to want to keep on going until they get until they feel like they have enough. So we're going to say user decision input. Again, it's the input, and the dot upper is the same reason why I have the dot upper right here, except the difference here is if they put in no, we want to quit out of this while loop. All right, so we're going to take this false, we're going to take this keep going. Notice how on line 29, keep going is equal to true. So while keep going is true, we want this while loop to keep going. However, at this portion of the code, we're saying if user decision.upper equals no, then we're going to say keep going equals false, which gets us out of this while loop. Alright, so that's not the only way to get out of this while loop, because if you remember up here we asked if there's a specific number of keywords the user would like to enter. So this is very important. Line 41 and 44, their orders really do matter. Alright, and the reason being is, say we had line 44 up above line 4, what's on line 41, it would essentially quit prematurely. So the reason being is because we're saying if size is, on line 44, we're saying if size is greater than 0, meaning the user actually decided to change the value of size from 0 to whatever number of keywords they would like to implement. We want to do count plus equals 1. And if we were to do this before the size, well, before what's on line 41, this whole program would quit prematurely, because we're saying we want count to go up by 1 and we want it to actually go to the next round. That's why those two matter. Line 41, this is how the size and count allow us to actually quit out of this section of the code, and we're saying if size equals count plus 1, we want to say print, seems you have hit your keyword limit, and we're going to change keep going to false. Alright, that's really what's going on in the insert function. The next thing we're going to talk about is this driver right here. The driver is what's going to allow this class to be run. Well, it's the way that I decided to run this class. You don't have to have this driver method. You can just go into the main file instead of doing self.insert right at the driver. You can do key, you could do it like this. Key dot insert and just like that. But it's going for each function of the code. If I have key dot whatever that function of the class is, this main file is going to get really big. So to save space in the save on simplicity, I'm just going to use a driver function. And really that's what's going on right here on line 4 is we're going to have this driver function. We're going to call this driver function to run the code. And now let's actually run the code. So I'm going to run it one of two ways. We're just going to say 1 on this part. If you don't know what's going on in this section of the code, go ahead and watch the last video of this little series I got going on about the YouTube keyword planner series that I got. But I'm going to continue on. 1, and I'm going to say tube. And then this is the section of the code that we just created. Hello YouTuber, now that we have the databases you'll be using, why don't we start adding some keywords? Is there a specific number of keywords you would like to enter? Please type yes. Otherwise, type any key if not. So we're just going to say yes for right now. And how many? Let's just say 3. And what keyword would you like to enter? Let's just say what? 3 for the score. What? 5 will 100, and the code exits as soon as we hit that limit of the keywords that we predefined. Now I'm going to run it again, except I'm going to press any key at that portion of the code. So enter 1 tube, enter what keyword, what 3. Now this is the section of the code where it's going to be asking if the user wants to keep on going. And I'm just going to press any key because remember we predefined that no is the way that you quit out of this code. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to say, let's just go with that. 3, enter, boom, 20, enter, will, 100, and let's just say no. Alright, and then you exit the code. Alright, so that's all I got for today's video. For those of you that watched this video to this point, you are truly awesome, and thank you so much. I got a little bit of a treat for you in just a couple of seconds, but if you enjoyed today's video, please do hit that like button. It really does help support this channel. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do consider hitting that subscription button as well as that bell icon so you get notified when I post my next video, because the next video is going to be about Colorama, and I got a pretty creative way in how I'm actually going to use the Colorama library within Python. A little bit of a sneak peek in 3, 2, 1. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.